Hi everyone, my name's Callista and
I'm her sister Gabby.
So a good amount of this video is going to focus on the recent shooting that happened in Atlanta, Georgia a few days ago. If you aren't too aware of what's happening, I would recommend checking out your news sources. Probably go to a few different ones to get a well-rounded view of what happened. Overall, the gist of it is a 21-year-old white man visited 3 massage parlors in Atlanta, Georgia. He murdered 8 people, 6 of them which were Asian women, and there are more details if you are interested in reading about that, learning more about what has happened. We're just gonna jump right into the video. I want to know what your initial reaction was to hearing about this news, because it was a few days ago. Today is Friday, what is it, the 19th? Yeah, today's Friday, March 19th, if you're wondering for context. This happened a few days ago, so it is still very recent, very fresh, and if you've been keeping up at all on social media or any news outlet, then you know how hurtful and like how painful this is for members of our community.
I feel like with the past 2 weeks, it has been extra rough because around 2 weeks ago, the incident with Sarah Everard, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing her name wrong, happened. And that hit me really hard too. I remember I was just seeing videos and like tearing up and crying because it's such a tragic incident. And then now, of course, like this happened too. So I think my first reaction was just exhaustion, because I feel like as a woman, especially as POC women, like we really can't catch a break. It's always some tragedy after another that we're dealing with and trying to fight. So I think exhaustion was my first reaction, of course, and then anger, like once it hit like the news a lot and then like responses to it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's honestly so bad, but whenever news like this comes about, I'm never surprised anymore. I'm more of, what's the right word?
It's like when you hear news of this, I feel like the public in general doesn't react as it should, because we're so used to hearing about like different tragedies and different murders that the idea of like 6 Asian women dying, it doesn't hit as hard as it should. If that makes sense.
I feel, yeah, and I think a word that would describe that is desensitized. Violence and hate crimes, especially hate crimes that are racially or sexually charged, those, you know, happen far too often in our society and around the world. So my first reaction was honestly apathy. I like knew that it happened. I knew that 8 people had been murdered, 6 of them had been Asian women, and my first response really wasn't a response. I just read about it. I was pretty indifferent to it, and then only later, maybe a few hours, maybe a day later, once I'd fully processed what this actually means and learned more about the victims too and more about the murderer, I think that's when it started to set in. You might have had a similar reaction of, oh, that's tragic, but I'm not surprised. How do you feel about your peers and your friends' responses on social media?
I feel like growing up in the Bay Area, we definitely live in a bubble where we're surrounded by like mostly college educated Gen Z. So it's always really encouraging to see like my social media just full of posts of support and like resources and how to educate yourself and be better. But I know that the majority of people aren't like that, but with like my social media, I've been pretty lucky.
That says a lot too about how we all have to be unified against the real issue here, which is white supremacy and just the society that we live in that really glorifies, you know, white male power.
And I feel like since we've been old and mature enough, this is like the first time I've seen like this much attention going towards Asian hate, which I've never seen before. Like news articles talking about it, famous people posting about it, and like colleges sending out like those, what's it called, those like messages that they need to send out, and like sororities making statements and all that. I feel like this is really the first time that we've seen all of this go towards stopping Asian hate, which is also really encouraging.
And I think that has to do a lot with like the current, I guess, social and political climate that we're living through right now. You know, this has been just a period of time for, I think, a lot of eyes have been opened and people realize that you either have to use your voice or you are a part of the problem, because it's not like anti-Asian sentiments are anything new. You know, if you look back in history, it's there, it's been there. And I think this has also been a time for me to learn more about it too. At this point, I think it's time to take a look at our society and what we can do as members of society to hopefully create a more inclusive and accepting and tolerant environment for people of color, especially people of color who are women, who identify as women. To give you background on us, we are half Chinese and half Vietnamese woman, and we have grown up in the Bay Area for our whole lives. So we were born in America, we've been raised with these American ideals, and overall we live a very privileged life, you know? We're so fortunate to have two parents who can provide for us. They've always supported us emotionally and financially. We have had access to, you know, quality public education. Gabby is currently in college. I graduated last year, so we have been afforded many opportunities and many privileges. So I just want to acknowledge that before jumping into our experiences as Asian American women in this society. Growing up, were there any moments or experiences that really made you look at your own identity or make you realize that, yeah, I'm Asian?
Oh, definitely. I feel like I didn't realize until I was older how much growing up in America just affected my childhood, like with us being Asian. I think up until I was like a junior in high school, I always just wished I was white. And I remember even when I was like in elementary school, I wished I was white. I just didn't realize how toxic that mentality was. It was just like a normal thought I had. I was like, oh, if I was white, like the boys would like me more, I'd have more friends, like I'd fit in better. That was always just in my mind growing up, and I didn't realize how sad that was until I was older, and then I tried, of course, like not think like that anymore.
I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I think that most Asian girls or people of color growing up in a society that really celebrates whiteness and American ideals can relate to our experiences growing up, because I have a lot of the same sentiments. I remember, even if I didn't fully know what this meant or could really understand what I was feeling, I knew that if I was white, life would be different for me, and I knew that if I was even half white, life would be different for me. You know, I knew that with that whiteness came privilege that I would never understand because I'm Asian. So growing up, and I think a lot of this also has to do with my idea of beauty and like self-confidence. I think that has changed a lot over the years. Now I am proud to be Asian American, I'm proud to be Vietnamese and Chinese, but growing up when you're vulnerable, going through puberty, like not sure who you are yet, or like how to present yourself, how you want to present yourself, it's pretty toxic trying to adhere to American beauty ideals that really aren't meant for people of color. Anything that I wanted to change about myself, I wanted to change it so I would look white. I would want to look more white, have that, you know, perfect little button nose, or have hair that was just lighter, perfectly straight, all of that stuff that even if I didn't know at the time what that meant, I knew that's what I wanted myself to look like. Looking back, it makes me kind of sad that I didn't want to embrace more of my own culture and my own identity as an Asian woman, just because I thought that if I did, I would be isolating myself more from my peers who were predominantly white, and this is nothing against them, but I just, for myself, knew that I was more accepted and I would fit in more if I just stayed within that comfort zone of, you know, whiteness and what all my peers were used to.
Yeah, I feel like I used to take pride in like when meeting new people who were white, I'd be like, oh, I don't have an Asian accent, like I'm super whitewashed, like I grew up in America like just like them, and I would take pride in that, like, oh, like once they talk to me they'll realize that I'm more like them than I look, which is such a toxic mindset to have. Like I shouldn't have to take pride in the fact that I'm not more Asian. Yeah. I don't act more Asian. And like even now I think we all still struggle with that. Yeah. Like I go to Cal Poly SLO, and that's a predominantly white institution, so even now I struggle with that mentality. I feel like we're super lucky where we didn't grow up with like, what's the word, like outright racism towards us, just a lot of microaggressions, which still sucked, but we were still very privileged. Yeah, so I'm grateful for that, but still I feel like those memories of like those microaggressions still stick with me to this day, even though they happened so long ago. And that just proves that it does stay with you for a while.
It does. If you feel comfortable sharing, what are some of those experiences that you've had?
I didn't even realize it was that bad until I got older once again, and like I would talk to my friends and be like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that happened. But like one small thing is I was just at like a birthday dinner for one of my friends who wasn't a school friend, so we didn't have a lot of mutuals. So when I went, it was like just like his friends, so I didn't know a lot of people, only like our mutuals. And I remember like I came late, so I was sitting at the end of the table where he wasn't there, so I was like just surrounded by his friends. And then like one of the guys, he turned to me and he was like, so what kind of Asian are you? And then immediately like all his friends around him started laughing, and I like felt so embarrassed because I didn't know what to do. And being me, I was just like, oh, like I'm half Chinese, half Vietnamese. But when I said that, like by that time they were just too busy laughing to actually care and listen. And looking back, I was like, oh, I wish I would have like embarrassed them back or like popped off on them or been like, oh, like what kind of white are you, like done something other than just kind of like awkwardly laugh and like answer the question. But in that moment, like I wasn't like, oh my god, like they're being so racist. I was just feeling really embarrassed and confused, and like I knew they were making fun of me, but I didn't know what to do, or like if they were really making fun of me.
You might not think it's a microaggression or even something wrong to ask, but we get like, what kind of Asian are you all the time. Oftentimes, if a guy is trying to like initiate conversation and express interest in me, one of the first questions he'll ask is like, what kind of Asian are you?
Do they word it like that?
Yeah, they do. Or like if they're a little more tactful, they'll be like, what's your ethnicity? Which I guess is a little better.
What's that food that like we used to eat a lot as kids? Like the pork song?
Oh, the dried pork.
Yeah, and then like
so if you're like,
you can insert a picture.
Yeah, if you're Asian, you probably know what this is. So I'm just gonna insert a picture right here. Usually it's so dried pork, but sometimes it's dried fish, and you just put it over like a bowl of rice. And that was a staple for us growing up.
All my friends loved coming over and eating it.
Yeah.
But I would bring it to elementary school. Like I was literally like like 6, and then we would just like, my friends or the people I was eating lunch with, they would just laugh and be like, oh my gosh, it looks like her hair or something. And at the time I'd kind of laugh too, but now that I realize like it is a microaggression from kids who are literally 6 and don't really know better. But yeah, it's just like something we experienced growing up.
I know, we haven't experienced living through hate crimes, you know, personally. Like, we are so fortunate to have been protected from that in a way. But microaggressions, they did happen so often that it's almost something that you become used to. For me, my advice to you, if you are interested in trying to make a difference or be a more active person in social justice and advocating for yourself or other communities, I would recommend using your platform. We all have social media. You know, we might not be famous on Instagram, we might not be influencers, but we all have platforms, and with that we also have a voice. So advocating for yourself if you are a member of a marginalized community, or speaking up and using your platform to advocate for a community that's really hurting. Use your platform, especially if you are someone who has ever, you know, posted a picture with matcha, or if you love boba, you love yoga, like, you know, all of these beautiful things that do come from like Asian culture and Asian history. Now is like your chance to really support these cultures and support these people. So many people in America want to take pieces and pieces of Asian culture without supporting Asian people. Can you imagine like if all of the people who ate Chinese food and sushi actually banded together to support the Asian community right now?
I know.
It would be crazy. We could really change America. We could change the world. Everyone loves Chinese food. What's something that you would want to tell maybe a more passive standby friend?
Yeah, I feel like I'm someone who also just hates confrontation. So this is coming from a person who is still struggling with this and like will always struggle with this, but I think you shouldn't be afraid to stand up for yourself and like call people out for saying microaggressions or saying anything that's racist. It can be scary, especially if they're like in a position of power or like superior to you, or just like your friend group who you don't want to make things awkward by like calling them out. But you don't have to do it in like an aggressive way. You can just let them know that they shouldn't be saying stuff like that if they are.
Yeah, just be like, hey buddy, that was a little racist.
I know, I wish I could just tell my younger self to stand up for yourself more and just call people out. I think that really is like the first step in change, especially because we're more young.
I know. And the thing is, it's okay. You know, we're young. We're still learning. You're still learning too. So it's okay to learn as you continue to advocate for yourself and for other members of marginalized communities. You know, we all gotta support one another. And in doing so, we will, I guess, strengthen this movement that is happening. We're living through a pretty crucial part of history, if anything, of 2020 has shown us. So we gotta keep that momentum going. A part of what drives me right now to be vocal on social media, vocal on this very small YouTube platform that I have, is the fact that growing up, I was both unaware of microaggressions and racism and like the power dynamic of being an Asian woman in a white supremacist society, and the fact that I was scared to call out racism and microaggressions when I did see it, because there were times when I think back now and I'm like, man, I wish I'd had the words that I do now to call out this racist dad that just made a really rude comment about my mom. Man, it gets my blood boiling, because if I knew what I knew now, but can't go back in the past, that's why we gotta do everything we can now. If you made it this far, thank you. Thanks for listening to us as we talked about recent events and our experiences growing up Asian American. We are going to link some resources in the description if you're interested in further educating yourself, beginning your social justice journey, or looking for worthy organizations and GoFundMes to donate to. They'll all be in the description below. I hope that you know that your voice matters. You have a platform, whether you see it or not. You know, if you're able to impact even one person, change the mind of one person, push one person to take action, that's a place to start. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.